I was a governor during September 11th, and shortly afterwards, we tasked our state police to go to all of what we thought were the vulnerable pieces of infrastructure in our state, electrical, chemical plants, and those kinds of things, and assess their level of vulnerability and to, in effect, red team them about how they could be attacked. Do we do that with our critical infrastructure? There's a lot of talk here about legislation, but it seems to me you could create a team to go to our power grid, to go to our water and gas, utilities, financial services, and say, look, this is what could happen to you. Have you thought about this? You don't really need legislation to do this. In other words, more proactive, trying to alert them to the risk and to alert them to some of the protections that may be available.
Right. So now you're really talking outside my lane as the director of NSA and more in the lane of the Department of Homeland Security. So I want to speak for Secretary Johnson. I share your concern. It's one reason why, speaking within my lane, within DOD, for example, we do just that. We aggressively go out, attempt to make sure we understand our structures, their importance to our ability to execute their mission, our mission, and then their vulnerability. So we do penetration testing, we do red teams, we do no-notice inspections, for example, as a way to make sure.
It seems to me we ought to, and perhaps we ought to have Jay Johnson here, but we need to be talking about being more active and not just wait and hope they're doing the proper defensive measures, but to alert them to where they're vulnerable and then to help them figure out the defensive measures. Let me change the subject for a moment to heroin, which is a absolute epidemic. 10 or 12,000 people a year now dying. The number is accelerating just astoundingly and tragically. Director Clapper talked about Mexico, and that's where it seems to be coming from. A specific question, one of the problems with the heroin that we're now seeing is it's often laced with fentanyl, which makes it more potent and often more dangerous. Where does that come from? Do we know, do we have intelligence on where the fentanyl is coming from, where it's being manufactured, how it gets into this unfortunate stream?
Senator, I know there's a lot of work being done on that. We have a pretty good sense that a fair amount of it is being manufactured in China, but it's also being manufactured in other places in the developing world. And so I know DEA and FBI and the rest of the intelligence community is spending a lot of time trying to understand where those sources are.
Well, I think we should know that, and it should be publicity, and we should name and shame those countries, because this is entirely unacceptable. It's a trade in death, and I would hope that there would be further analysis of that, and also analysis of the trade stream that allows it to get to Mexico or Central America. Second question, do we have adequate resources in terms of intelligence, but also in terms of interdiction in Mexico and Central America? My understanding is we have pretty small number of people in some of those Central American countries which also are contributing to this. Do you feel as the intelligence community that you have adequate resources to understand this trade, where it comes from, who's behind it? And then, of course, that leads into interdiction. I'll follow up with that. Mr. Comey, your thoughts?
Surely not, given the size of the tidal wave of heroin that's washing over from Mexico. And there's two waves. We talk a lot about the heroin wave for good reason. There's another wave washing over the western United States that's methamphetamine from Mexico, and the two waves are actually now crashing together in the middle of the United States. And so surely not is the honest answer. We have built, I think as Director Clapper said, much more effective relationships among ourselves in focusing on that problem and with our partners in Mexico and Central America. But honestly, it's not good enough given the size of the threat.
Another question is, how's it getting in? Do we know how much by land and how much by water? My understanding is a great deal of this is coming by water, and one of the problems is a lack of adequate interdiction resources, both in terms of the military and the Coast Guard.
Well, a large amount of it comes by water, and it tends to switch from both sides of the Central American landmass, Pacific or Atlantic side. But to pick up on what General Clapper said, what I've heard from the Coast Guard especially is they have a lack of resources to interdict. But also a lot of it comes by land, tunnels, smugglers, trucks. Because it's a tidal wave, it's washing in a lot of different ways.
A tidal wave of death is what we're talking about, and I appreciate your efforts, but I think we have to realize that this is something that's really exploded almost literally in the last 3 or 4 years, and we have to react to it proportionate to the threat to our people. This is killing people right now in the United States, in every state, and it's not an abstract concern. It's not a possible virus. It's something that's happening right now. So I commend you for your efforts, but I hope that this is something where the community can work together to develop the information necessary, but then we can also, it's got to be all of government to react, to take the information and act upon it. Thank you very much for your testimony.